Go. Okay, good morning. We are continuing. Taam Lifgam. Yoreh Kuf Chaf Bet. We are continuing with Seif Vav. Stam Keilim, Stam Kli Goyim. Heim Becheskat She'enam B'nei Yomam. Okay, so Stam Keilim, something was cooked in their kli. Everything here is basically, we're learning Hilchos on B'diavad because obviously any kli that's not kosher or kashered, we're not allowed to use. But it was cooked on it b'diavad. So we said if it's stam kli, it was just pulled off the shelf from the drawer. So the halacha is that we assume it hasn't been used in 24 hours, and therefore it's ta'am lifgam. Lefichach im avar v'nishtamesh bahem kodem hechsher. If it was used by mistake, so then we say it's the hatavshel mutter. The food that was cooked in such a pot, it was already done by mistake, so then we say it's okay. Okay. Just want to point out. Now, the Shach points out, he writes, again, I'm going to point out, he writes, Katvu ha-poskim. Again, when we say poskim, usually we mean later achronim. When he means it, he's referring to the Rishonim. So here they write, it's a sveka, and that's why we go lakula. Maybe when you just pick off a goyish, a dish off the shelf, maybe it was used today. Maybe it hasn't been used since yesterday or days before. That's one suffix. The other suffix is, when he used it, who said it gives any flavor? Maybe what was put into the dish didn't give any flavor. Maybe it was a ta'am lifgam. It could be parva, it could be klisheni, but those. Okay, so that's what he writes. Okay, it could be not isser altogether, or ta'am. So whatever it is, therefore, I mean, there's generally an assumption that they do use isser involved, but it depends what kind of isser, and depends. Bottom line, it's another suffix. Whatever you can imagine, that'll create your at least a second suffix. And so therefore we say sveka lekula, and therefore b'diavad we allow you to use it. Okay. Right, Chazal or Gozer, we said at least lechadchila we're not allowed to. Okay. Now, do you need to ask? So the poskim say, really, mikardin, you do not even need to ask. The Shach quotes it b'shem the Marshal. You don't need to ask. But if you know that it was used, or he tells you it was used, so that, well, if he tells you it wasn't used, then we could trust him. If he tells you it was used within a day, then again it depends if you believe him or not. But in general, the Shach quotes the Marshal that says we need to be machmer, or because the fact that we know it's always the chazaka of being you don't really have a proper chazaka that it's kosher, because we know that in general there's blias of iser, so therefore we trust him lachumra. But then he quotes the Mari ben Chaviv, who says, no, you don't even have to trust him, and you can use it. And the Taz says you can use Mesiach Lefitumo, but in general, you don't have to ask him, but if you do ask him, then it does create a problem. Okay, let's see. Now, what about dishes? Now, this is a common issue. Sometimes you have dishes that are regularly used on a constant basis. Let's say you go to a restaurant or a catering, and they're constantly using their dishes. So do you have to be machmer? So many poskim point out, the Pri Chadash, the Ran, the Ramban, Bach, Maharit, Sefer Truma, they all seem to say that it is a problem if you know that they're being used all the time. Stam Keilim Eina B'nei Yoman is when you don't know when they were last used, and it's reasonable that it's been 24 hours. So then, but and the Aruch HaShulchan also writes that it could be a major problem, but he writes, Hakol lefi ha'inyan. It really depends. And it depends what are the chances it was used. Maybe if it hasn't been used from the whole night before, shkia until nates, that might be enough, right? Because we learned according to that is eno ben yomo according to Rashi Rabbeinu Taam. So, anyways, Sheilat Rav basically, if it's done, how to pascha in certain situations. Does it apply to glass? So glass, b'diavad is probably okay. I mean, I was reading a shaila. Let's say a person had in mind, hired a caterer, and everything's supposed to be done kosher, or chad pami, disposables. And for whatever reason, the caterer rented out dishes, I guess treif dishes or something, whatever it was, and it was already served. And they put it out, and now what do? Can you eat the food? So, so generally we would say Stam Keilim Einam B'nei Yoman, and the food is b'diavad going to be the food itself. If you know the food itself was kosher, so then anyways, but it depends. Different issues. Was it a klisheni, gush, charif, different things that we learned to keep in mind, and so it really depends on when was the last time it's possible the dishes were used and what's likely. Okay, so again, Lefia Kol Lefia Ha'inyan. Okay, let's read the Rama. Haga, Avaim Chamam Mayim B'Kli Shagoy. Lalush Behen Pat, Asr Lalush Be'otan Mayim. Okay, so the Rama points out, let's say it was heated in a pot. Now, we're not talking about a kumkum or a hot water urn, which usually we can assume is only used for hot water. Maybe it depends on the case, or plain coffee. But let's say you used a pot that might have been used for treif, and it was heated up in there. So now, do we call that? So we say if it Stam Keilim Ein B'nei Yoman b'diavad, now you can drink the item. But the Rama says we're going to read it inside. You didn't. In this case, you didn't heat it up to drink. You heated it up to then pour into your dough or flour to make dough or for bread. So it's still in that level, since you warmed it up for the purpose of baking, and now you want to mix it in for baking. Going forward, you're still at a point of lechatchila. That's how the Rama learns. So let's read it inside. The davar is a mikre lechatchila. Hoil v'adayin lo itchil hanato. You didn't start using your hana. Shelo huchmu lishtia. Because you didn't heat up the drink you didn't heat up the water to drink. If you heated the water to drink, and now you're about to drink it, and you realize, it's already called b'diavad because you heated it up to drink. It's already heated. It's already done. Go ahead and drink it b'diavad. It's fine. Aval davar shenasa bishvilo. If it's done for that item, v'lo bishvil davar acher. Then, if it's done for that, for drinking, not for cooking, so then that's when you say b'diavad you could enjoy it. Aval afal pi shehu shal goy v'yis. Now, okay. Okay. Alpha pi shehu shal goy v'yisrael kona mimenu lechatchila muter me'achar dekavar naaseh biyad goy mikrei de eved. Now, what about buying? A goy makes it, and a goy is selling it. Is that called lechatchila or b'diavad? So the Rama says, buying from a non-Jew when it's already made to sell, that's called b'diavad because it's already done. The goy did it, and he did it for drinking, and now it's ready to be drunk. So you're just buying something that was already done, and that's called b'diavad, and so it's mutter to buy. Again, teaching them how to make it, hiring them to do it, putting a hashkacha on it, that might be called lechatchila, or it is, depending on the case. But, okay. The Shach just points out, now if you heat it for drinking, it's mutter, that the Rama really said. And yeah, it basically just repeats the same as the Rama. Fine, let's continue in the Shulchan Aruch. Afa pichein, Even so, Asr lo marla goy basheli yarakot b'kedei. You can't tell a non-Jew to cook with his pot for you. Right? Lachatchila, you can't go to him and say, take your pot, Stam Keilim Eina B'nei Yoman, and cook into it. Because Lachatchila, you're not allowed to do that. Again, of course, we're assuming there's no issues of Bishul Akum and Treif over here. Okay, or basar shenisalam in ayin, it's just your vegetables, whatever it is. Maybe they're eaten raw. Whatever the case is, we're avoiding that issue. But we're just discussing for the purposes of using his kli lechatchila, so that you can't do. V'chen lo yomar lo aseli merkachat, and you can't tell him to make you this jam. Shekola omer bashali harayo ki'ilu bishal biyadav. When you're telling him to do it, that's lechatchila. It's as if you're doing it yourself, and you're not allowed. But it could be if you're going to an expert who is using like a expert chef, whatever it is, for one particular, that's not a good example. Like you're manufacturing one particular item, and that's all that's being made in that kitchen or that factory. So then, if you know that the ingredients are always good, then there's not a problem of Stam Keilim, because you know that the Keilim are always Shakola Umnim Miyachadim Keilim Nikiyim Lamalachtam. Right, especially this applied more in those days when the ingredients were more simple. So then they would have special Keilim for what they're doing, and you don't have to worry about having anything else introduced. Kadei Shelo Yifkamu Umunatam. They're not going to jeopardize their business by doing things that are, that people don't want in there and that people are not expecting. So even though it may be mutter, the Shulchan Aruch does conclude, though, ubal nefesh, but a bal nefesh, someone who's really concerned about his neshama, yachush edvarim, yachush, he should be careful to avoid any of these cases, even using the goyim's keilim, even though the ingredients are probably fine and the keilim are probably never used for anything else. Shedvarim elu mevi'im lidei tahara v'nekiyut. Because being careful with all these things, there's reasons to be machmer, and it helps for a person's tahara and being naki from averos. Okay. Let's read Zayin. Kashem shestam kilim shel goyim eina b'nei yoman, kach stam kelim shelanu v'cheskat she'enan b'nei yoman. Okay. So now, when we're talking about, so we just learned by Stam Keilim of a Goy. We say it's Eino Ben Yoman. So then the Shulchan Aruch continues, and the same thing applies to in our home. If you have dishes that are Eino Ben Yoman, so then Stam Keilim, you pull them off the shelf, then you can always assume your dishes in your house are not within 24 hours, and obviously this is important mainly for us for basar b'chalav issues, if a mistake happened. So that's the general rule. In our own kitchens, we can generally assume, unless you know otherwise, it's Taam, Lifgam, that's in the kli. And just to point out again, here I say Keilim Shalanu. Here it means our dishes, the Jewish dishes, as opposed to Hilchos Pesach, where Shalanu, the Mayim Shalanu, it stayed overnight. Okay, let's go to Chet. Kli shene'esar b'bliat eser v'nitarev ba'acherim v'eino nikar batel berov. Now, you have a kli, and it became bli of eser inside of it, but it mixed up with other dishes, and it's batel berov, 1 spoon to 2 spoons, and you know that one of them is treif and 2 of them are kosher, so the halacha is you can rely and go after the rov, and you do not have to kasher it. Same thing if you have a kli of Eino ben Yomo and a kli of ben Yomo, you can assume that they're all Eino ben Yoman. Again, you can't use, in the case of Eino ben Yoman, you can't use it lechatchila, but you can use it, but the food is okay. So, and we don't make you, we don't say it's davar sheishol matirin. We had this before. It's to go to kasher it. It's chisar and kis, it's zman, the tircha. So therefore we say it's batal, and we don't apply the din derabanan of in bitul b'davar sheishol matirin.
You mentioned the chumrah last time. So it's halakha.
That what?
Should wait 24 hours.
I
think you said that. So maybe.
It's so if it is, so it's better to wait 24 hours. Very good. Okay, thank you. So all right, so that's better to wait 24 hours. You don't have to. Good. Tet. Yesh lizar melaniach beveit hagoy kli seuda. Now, don't leave your dishes in your neighbor, goyish neighbor's house. Why? Because we have to worry, maybe he'll use them, right? They're good dishes. He wants to see how it feels to eat off of your dishes. He's got some variety in his life, and there's a real chashash. And he'll use it for treif foods, and therefore it's asim. So one should not give it to him to avoid the problem. Oh, interesting Shiloh, by the way, just wanted to mention. We're discussing Einam ben Yoman. What happens if you know you used the dish yesterday, for sure, but you don't know if it's been 21 hours or 24 hours, right? So it's a suffix if you call it Einam ben Yoman. Chochmas Adam writes in Klal Nun Hey, if it's overnight and it's been, so normally it sounds like the way he writes. Normally, if you're not sure, if it's an Isser Deraisa, we're afraid that it was used for an Isser Deraisa, you have to be Machmer. Because Taam Ke'ikr, and it's a real problem. But if it's only an Isser of Derabanan, you could be Mekel. He doesn't really discuss Deraisa Derabanan, but it's definitely, I think is what would make sense. However, what he discusses, even if it's an Isser Deraisa, you would have to be Machmer, unless it's the entire night. If it goes from Shkia to Nates, well, Kol Shekain is Dervana. I think, okay, again, if it's an Isser Deraisa and it hasn't been overnight, and you don't know if it's 21 hours or 24 hours or 23 or 24, then we have to be Machmer. That for sure he writes for an Isser Deraisa. Because we're talking about a Blia of an Isser Deraisa. And so therefore, the suffix deraisa l'chumra. So therefore, it goes from if it's less than 24 hours, it's mamash bli of iser. Only after 24 hours do we say it goes taam lifgam. So if you're not sure if it's been 21 or 23 or 24, you have to be machmer for sure. That's what you see from the poskim for an iser deraisa. That's clear. On an iser derabanan, I didn't see beferish. But there is definitely room to be mekel. What the Chochmas Adam Kula is, even if it's an Isser Deraisa, but it's been an entire night. In other words, usually when you're not sure, when you know you used the dish yesterday, then but you know it wasn't used from Shkia till Nates. So then, in addition to the Sveika or the suffix over here of Stam Keilim, you have another suffix, so it's for sure it's Sveika, another suffix because maybe the lachazek Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam that after if linat laila is enough to turn it into according to them it always turns it into Einam ben Yoman and a Taam Lifgam. Okay, so if you're not sure, it's important. What was that? The Shulchan Aruch does not paskin like him. None of the poskim paskin like Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Everyone says you need 24 hours. But whenever it comes to a question on halacha, we often take an opinion in the Rishonim, and it's really to the discretion of the posek. Sometimes they'll take a das yachid, and sometimes they'll take a major opinion in the Rishonim. But even though la halacha, it's clear, no one argues, and it's a beferish Shulchan Aruch, but they will take the opposing opinion as a snif, as a tziruf, for a sveika or for things like that. Okay. Haga. You give it to a non-Jew to fix. So what do you do? So the Rama says, if you're going to give it, you want to repair your dishes, and you want to give it to a non-Jew. I don't know, a metal appliance or whatever, glue something back together. So then, I think we generally learned before, it's not usually going to be an issue up to Vilas Keilim, but it is a problem, the Rama says, where he might cook after he fixes it. He might eat with it before he gives it back to you. So therefore, you have to make some kind of a siman that he doesn't use it. V'yim avar v'lo asa. But if you didn't, you just gave it to him. Now you go to pick it up. Tzrichim hagala. The Ramah says, you should now do hagala on what you took back because maybe he used it and maybe there's treif in there. V'davka, the Ramah says, but I'm only saying you should do hagala im shahuk tzad etzel hagoy, dahainu kechatzi yom. If it stays with him for half a day, I don't know if he means 6 hours or whatever, a substantial amount of time, so then we're worried maybe he had time to fix it and then cook with it and eat it and use it. But if it was just for an hour, there's no reason to be choshesh. Now, I'm only telling you this chumrah, I don't know if it's mika or din, it sounds like a chumrah of doing hagala, if you want to use it the same day. Because now it's no longer, we might not apply so much the inyan of Stam Keilim Eino Ben Yoman, you might lose a suffix. Okay, to me it sounds like a chumrah, but the shema nishtamish, but this is what he holds. Shema nishtamish ba'agoy, Allah, because maybe he used it within the past half a day or within the past couple hours. He maybe used it, and so you can't really say maybe it was yesterday or today. Aval im lo lacho min agoy ad la'achar zman, but let's say you took it. It was there for a while. The nucha lomar afim nishtamish bo agoy kvar nifkam v'nishtamed le'et. But let's say you left it for him to fix, and you picked it up a week later. So the Ramah says, well, you're afraid he used it, right? The Ramah is almost like assuming he's for sure going to use it. But we're saying, okay, he for sure used it, right? But maybe he used it 6 days ago, and now it's just sitting on the shelf waiting for you to pick up, and because he knows you're not going to pick it up the first day. So he has a day to use it. But he knows that you're going to walk in and want to pick it off the shelf. He has to keep it clean and ready for you. So then you have a sfeik sveka, he says. Then again, he goes back to the sfeik sveka. Oh, shenishta b'yad Yisrael, la'achar shalacho min hagoyim made late. Or you picked it up. So don't use it for 24 hours. And then keep it on your shelf. And then azlinan lakula. And then you could be makel to use it. Lachatchila ve'ein chosheshin. B'di'evid, but b'di'evid it's okay. In other words, b'di'evid if it was already cooked with. L'chatchila, don't use it for 24 hours, but if it's already cooked with it, then go ahead. You can use it. V'im lachol min hagoy be'oto yom shenatanu lo v'alver nishtamish bo b'lo hadala yesh osrim ha'machal kamo b'kli shehu b'vadei ben yomo. Yeah, but he says there are some who are machmer and say the food's usher now. Makom tzorech ish lahakal b'di'evid. Makom tzorech, there is what to be one could be makel. Ulechatchila yesh lizar b'chol inyan afilo b'avadim mishpachas hagoyim b'chol inyan. But then he continues and he says lechatchila, one should always just be careful anyway. Afilo b'avadim mishpachas hagoyim shebeit Yisrael shelo yached Keilim shelanu etzlan. That make sure we don't put our dishes in their homes. Shama yishtamshu behem b'dvarim ha'asurim. They might use it. Now, in general, really, again, I would say akol lefi ha'inyan. When you're giving to a repair shop and he's not eating over there and cooking with it, I don't know how much we need to be machmer nowadays. The way people use and fix and buy keilim, but again, akol lefi ha'inyan. Maybe it's better to wait 24 hours.
In their house, it means even in the Jewish house, they shouldn't be in charge of the keilim.
Right, so he's saying you shouldn't even let them use their keilim, I think. No, shelo yeyached keilim shel. Oh no, it's our keilim in their house. Yeah. So, anyways, we see that if you're going to have a goy work in their room, in their house.
That's fixed, right?
Or to store.
Well, whatever the situation is. So that's why if you have a non-Jew working in your home, it's very important that they use your keilim and don't bring, or their keilim, but...
What's wrong with that keilim?
Well, we have to avoid issues of bishul akum, but make sure that the best thing is don't let them bring, we're not going to have a whole review here, but basically you don't want them to bring in their food to warm up anything in your house unless you're doing it for them. And then you avoid all the issues. And if you're going to have your dishes in a workplace, again, everything depends on your situation, but keep in mind you might want to keep your dishes always in a bag or separate, because sometimes in the workplaces people share dishes. It kind of depends on the situation.
Shach says,
Um, Right. Now the Shach points out, in the case where people are makbid not to share each other's dishes, and you're yotze v'nichnas, you're there in the workplace, or you're there in your house, and you have a rule, no one shares dishes, so then the olam is make lechatchila, because you're yotze v'nichnas, and they know not to use it with their tray food. So again, everything is just keep in mind, everything is case specific. Okay, I'm just. Should we finish or stop? Pause.